Morning, everybody, and a really, really warm welcome to the Saxton Fireside Chat. I'm here today with Chris Riddell, but before we get started, I just really want to thank our sponsors for today. So Scene Change for providing us with a COVID-19 approved studio. Got the Glen 20 and everything going on. And Dan Event Hire for providing us with our beautiful tub chairs so that we can be 1.5 metres apart and distance ourselves appropriately. So as we move into a period of isolation and separation, the exchange of stories and ideas has never been more important than it is now. So Saxtons, we're launching a series of fireside chats with some of the world's greatest storytellers. And kicking off today, of course, with Chris Riddell. They're going to be running on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and we're going to give you unprecedented access to some of our incredible talent that we have in our books, and we're stripping away and actually getting to know them much more on a personal basis and understanding a little bit more about what makes them tick. So today our first session is with Chris Riddell. He's going to share his personal story with us today. He's going to talk to us about how we can adjust to our new normal and the impact that the crisis is going to have as we live and work, and what this means for us all moving forward. Chris is an award-winning global futurist, for those of you who haven't had the pleasure of seeing him speak. He's industry recognised. He's absolutely an inspirational keynote speaker on emerging trends in our hyper-connected world. He's also a global emerging trend spotter for businesses. He's a global trailblazer. Chris has worked for some of the largest and most successful companies and brands in the world, having lived and worked in the UK, Saudi Arabia, Dubai, Kuwait, China, New Zealand and Australia. His understanding of the new world is absolutely compelling and thought-provoking at the very, very least. So I'm going to introduce Chris. So Chris, welcome today.
Thanks, Anne.
No problem. So first question for you today is, how did you end up where you are today?
It's a bit of a crazy world. I remember when my last real job that I had, I worked at Mars, the confectionery company. I was their first chief digital officer. And one of the things that I did whilst I was there was talk at some of the industry events and tech events. And the irony is, back all those years ago, that I found speaking terrifying.
Right.
It was one of those things that I did to challenge myself. And that was 7, 8 years ago now, and then I quickly ended up where I am here today. And yeah, that's how it started out.
So Mars, my grandfather worked at Mars, so that would have been, my parents lived in Ballarat.
Everyone, I was talking to somebody else about this the other week, everyone knows somebody in Australia that lives in Ballarat. When I first moved to Australia just over 10 years ago, I ended up living in Ballarat for quite a few years. And there's some weird magnetic force that sucks people into Ballarat. And the other thing I've noticed is that people that grew up in Ballarat, they might leave for a while and they'll go away, but they ultimately always come back.
So let's just sort of go back a little bit. What did you always want to be when you were a little boy and you grew up? What did you want to do?
I remember one of the things, and funny enough, this is one of the things I was thinking about the other week. I was driving along and I had this weird reflection, nostalgic moment. I remember when I was a little boy, we were driving through Riyadh in Saudi Arabia. I would have been 8 years old, 7 years old, and I remember a plane flying overhead, and I said to the person in the car that I was with at the time, I wanted to be a pilot, and I was desperate to become a pilot. And then the crazy thing is, when I was at high school, I joined in the UK, I don't know whether it's the same here in Australia, but we have what's called a CCF, the Combined Cadet Force. I joined the RAF at high school. And as part of that in the UK, the RAF then select about 100 kids every year to go and do their private pilot's license. And when I was 16 years old, I went up to Scotland, a place called Kirkcaldy, and I learnt to fly, where the RAF paid for me to go and do my private pilot's license. And the idea behind it was they were trying to entice kids to want to join the RAF. So they paid for your license to show you what it's all about. And it was the most amazing thing. And the stupid thing is, I did my private pilot's license and then went, thanks, but no thanks. That's enough for me.
So do you still fly today?
I do, funnily enough, yeah. So Moorabbin Airport, this is one of my secret things that I do. Moorabbin Airport is where, so I've had to redo my license because I let it lapse. And shit, there's no way you'd want me to go up and fly having not done it for about 10 years. So I went to Moorabbin Airport, to one of the flying schools there, and yeah, so I've been doing that for a while. It got busy last year, so I put it on hold for 3 or 4 months. Yeah. But now, funny enough, I was walking the dog yesterday and I looked up, the sky was blue. We had one of those beautiful Melbourne days and it was just still, it was quiet and it was crisp, and I thought, wow, I'm going to go back out there next week. And do you know, it's one of the most cathartic things that you can possibly do. That sounds a bit strange, but being in this tiny little aircraft, when it's just you and one other person who's the instructor. Yeah. And even when you're doing circuits, they call it, so they call them touch and go. So you're doing circuits, you land and you take off immediately and just do loops around the airport, and you're doing that on your own. Yeah. And in fact, you do that once, so anybody can do that after you've been flying for about 15 hours, you can do circuits on your own. Yeah. And once you get into that space, it is one of the most cathartic, relaxing things you will ever do. It's just you in this tiny plane, up in the sky. It's nuts.
Single engine? Couldn't do it. Yeah,
it's crazy. It's crazy.
Do it. No, so I'll leave that to you. So tell me, what does your average day look like?
Now?
Yeah, now. Maybe before and now.
Yeah, wow. They're completely different. the days now. And I suppose the interesting thing is, this situation, these times, and I hate to use the word unprecedented because everyone's using it, these times that we're in now, for me and a couple of, certainly my mates who do the same thing, speaking over in the US, this started for us about mid-Jan, end of Jan, when they started cracking down on it over there. I remember chatting with you from the US on one of our calls, saying, hey, this is starting over here. So prior to that, it was normal to be on a flight every week, apart from a small window at Christmas and a small window around the new fin year every year. And that was what it was. You were just continuously up and down. And you kind of took it for granted that you could just jump so quickly and freely from plane to plane, just like you were jumping off a tram. Yeah. And that was just a complete normality. Now, what's normal is we're all adjusting to me being back at home full time. it's been an adjustment for all of us. Let's just say it like that. But it's about creating a completely new routine. I mean, we've had to create a routine where I'm there every day, and it's been good, it's been challenging, but now it's about no longer getting up in the middle of the night because of jet lag or stuff like that and blaming tiredness on that, but having a routine that we run to. And that's been the bit that we've learned very quickly, has got us through, is having a very fixed routine. Even though you can't do an awful lot outside the house, having a routine inside makes a huge world of difference.
Yeah. And so would you recommend that for people that are working from home, sort of following a routine? I was
chatting with a few friends of mine about this just the other week. You know, I've always been in the technology industry since I left high school. And working from home or working remotely has not been this weird notion for me. Yeah. So you kind of take it for granted and assume that everybody can do that. And I think the realization is that there are a heap of people out there that have spent their entire career going into an office that have now, and there's these hilarious pictures on the internet. I posted one on Instagram the other day with these kids being tied up with gaffer tape. Probably a little bit inappropriate, but it was funny. And I think people have had to adjust to, how do I work from home? Because most houses don't have, or a lot of houses wouldn't even have a place set up for a home office like many of us have been used to. So setting a routine, setting private space to have that, if you can do that, if your house allows that, which is completely separate from the rest of the house, is critical. It is because it allows you to go in and out of a zone, and your workspace, where even if you're not going into a physical office down in the city or wherever it is, you've still got to have a zone where when you're in that particular area, you are able to completely focus. And in order to be able to separate yourself from home and work, even in the same building, is critical to your thinking.
Yeah, okay. So in your career, what's sort of one of the strangest or funniest things that you've experienced?
I think if I look at my career now, this is a really awkward conversation. If I look at my career now, some of the funniest behaviour I actually see, because the bits that I see in our industry are speakers. Speakers, and there are certain countries, without naming any, that are worse than others. But the heavy attention-seeking components that you see to speakers that really think they're rock stars, that think they're world changers. Like we do some amazing stuff, but people that have been in the industry for decades, I've seen some crazy requests. Like one speaker, without mentioning any names, on their rider, because we all have riders, has a thing where they want their room to be painted a certain colour. Their green room painted a certain colour. They're a well-known speaker as well that I've shared a stage with. They want their room painted a certain colour before they go there every time. I think surely that's going too far.
That's way too far.
Yeah. There's heaps of things I've seen like that, and some countries are certainly worse than others for that. That's been some of the strangest things I've seen in the last few years.
Yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it? So it's sort of like people really need to sort of maybe just take a step back and just remember why they're there, because it's all about inspiring and educating, and it's actually about the audience. It's actually not so much about them.
I know. And have you got any stories like that?
I've got a lot of from my hotel days. Oh my God, we don't have enough time for me to share those stories with you. All of our speakers are fabulous, so there's nothing that I would say about our speakers. We love them all. I think probably one of the most challenging things that ever happened to me was I started my career in hotels, and I was working at the St Kilda Road Travelodge, which is now an apartment block on St Kilda Road. And in the hotel industry, when the hotels are running in high occupancies, which unfortunately, of course, they're not at the moment, you actually oversell. Right, so you always have sort of half a dozen people that you potentially have to, what in the hospitality industry is called bumping, and you have to bump them somewhere else. So you always had rooms somewhere else. Yeah. And this particular night, fortunately, the night team had started. So the night manager was a guy called Chris, actually. And this gentleman came to check in, and I told him, unfortunately, we didn't have a room. And he actually jumped the desk and then actually had me pinned up against the wall because I didn't have a hotel room for him. So I look back at that now and have a bit of a laugh about it, but at the time, yeah. So anyway, so ended up calling the police and see you later.
Wow.
But yeah, from a hotel perspective, thousands of stories. We don't have enough time for that. So what drives you, and what really makes you tick? Like what really gets you excited?
You and I had a chat about this a few weeks back. Yeah. So this is the part of the story that isn't so well known. So when I used to be in corporate, even previous to Mars, I spent, as many of us have got friends and partners in the corporate world, I spent a huge amount of my life every year going to conventions, conferences, some that the businesses I worked for paid to go and had membership with. So companies like Gartner. I mean, I've been going to Gartner conferences since I was, in my mid-20s every year. And funnily enough, the Gartner Symposium in the Gold Coast I've been to my speaking days, I can't count how many times. And I used to always sit in the audience and sit there with my colleagues at not just Gartner events, but any of them think, surely we can tell these stories better. And I'm specifically talking about tech stories, so tech industry type events. They always used to have, and Gartner used to lead the pack with it. There was no doubt at all. I have to say that because Gartner are a very good client of mine, and I love you. But Gartner have always led the pack and were great. But a lot of events, I just used to sit there and I used to be bored, mindless out of them, because tech people have never been very good, honestly, at telling stories.
Yeah.
And I used to sit there and go, wow, if I was to do it, I would do this, or I would do that, and I would make it more of an experience, or I would focus on really engaging people through comedy and content, playing with that and the fusion of the two. And that was what was the start of me then starting to go, hey, so if I did start speaking, what would that look like? And I started pulling that together. And I remember the first time I went on stage, this was before I even knew there was a professional speaking industry.
Yeah.
I remember the first event I went to, it was an Optus event, and I was on stage talking in the capacity of the role I had at that time. And it was terrifying, absolutely terrifying. But wow, the response and the impact I had from that audience. I look back now and I cringe. I've still got my keynote from that day. In fact, I found it the other day when I was looking through some hard drives. I look back and cringe. And by this, to give you context, this was the time when Angry Birds was starting to get traction. So that's the era we're talking about. And we were starting to get our heads around apps on mobile phones.
Yeah.
And the impact that I had there, and the fun that I had, the sheer terror I had walking on that stage, I wanted more of that. And honestly, anybody that's been in this industry and stood on a stage, and I've got some of my very best friends that I have that do what I do, there's one thing we all completely agree on. We are addicted to the feeling that we get being on stage. Even talking about it now, the hairs go up on the back of my neck. Yeah. We are addicted to that feeling that we create in that audience. Sure, we love the content, we love what we talk about, but ultimately, it's how we make people feel. That's what drives us. And it's a drug. It's our only legal way of getting high without getting arrested. And what we are always trying to do is to increase that for ourselves and for everyone else there. And it's this constant circle, this chase that we're on. How can we increase and get a better feeling, and how can we do that for them in that audience? That's what drives us. And it's probably one of the least spoken parts of our industry. Yeah, right. Because it doesn't quite fit with what a client would expect.
Yeah, okay. I think one of the really interesting things that you do as well is that from your community, you really engage and you speak to so many people to find out what's going on in the industry, and research from your perspective is key. So just talk us through how you work with your community and gather all your research and try to stay ahead of the game. Like you and I started talking, sort of just after Christmas about what was going on, because US was really impacted first, really before we started to see a bit of a shift here in Australia. So just talk us through how you do that.
I think even so, in times of crisis and chaos that we've got now, or even in normal times, I am vociferous in the fact that I love talking to people behind the scenes to understand what's going on in their life, in their business, in their corporate world, and I stitch all of that stuff together. And I look for commonalities as well. So whether I'm talking to yourself as the CEO of a speakers bureau, or whether I'm talking to the HR director of a telecommunications company here in Australia, there are commonalities, there are common things that are going on there, even though the industries are radically different. And I look for the patterns across that, and then try and work out how those all play together. And then even in my community, again, with friends of mine, with people that do what I do, we fundamentally all have the same things going on. And for me, it's a case of always trying to find out what those are. Because here's the thing. You can never, ever absolutely predict the future, but what you can look for are patterns that are going on in human behavior and in businesses, and stitch those together, and that will give you a real damn good insight of what's coming around the corner. And that's more important than anything today. And everyone needs to be able to do that in some way, shape or form as a leader within a business today.
Okay. So many people, and probably moving forward more than ever now, people are going to need mentoring and, help to get through COVID-19. In terms of you and sort of advice people have given you along the way, what's the best piece of advice you've ever been given?
The one piece of advice, and I give it to other friends of mine, including I said it to my brother the other day, and it's more important than ever now, is be very mindful of the people that you choose to surround yourself with, because you are the average of that. You are the average of the top 5 people that you spend the most time with, and have a think about that, because that will radically change your perception on how you divvy up your time. Because in times of chaos like we have now, we have only got a bucket of so much time available to us. And you've got to be really prescriptive around how you divide that bucket up. Let me give you an example. There was a friend of mine, a really good friend of mine, the other day rang me in tears on the phone, because chaos was ensuing in their industry. It was an absolute meltdown moment. And this very good friend of mine, had been just firefighting for days and days, putting out fires. Somebody's ringing up to cancel this event, another person ringing up. And we've all been through that in the last few months. As a bureau, you know where that's going on. And then this person also had personal stuff going on. So in their life, an ex-partner was ringing in, giving them a whole load of grief. And you can see how these things build up and up and up. And this friend of mine had spent an entire past just over a week fighting all of these different fires. And I said, the thing you've got to do is now look at this era that we're in. You've got to quickly put some of those fires out, so make bigger decisions in a very much more rapid way than you would normally, so that you can start putting some of those to one side and then getting on with looking at some more forward-looking thing. Because if you spend your entire time now just trying to put out fires for weeks and weeks, you'll burn out and you'll not be able to get anywhere forward. So apart from just choosing who you surround yourself with, be absolutely brutal in getting rid of some of those painful things that are going on, make a decision, push it to one side, move on, get on to the next one. And then start to divvy up your day and go, you know what? In the morning, I'm going to spend this amount of time doing forward-looking stuff and dealing with stuff that I have to do to either keep my business or the organization moving forward. And I'm only going to attribute this much time to putting out fires and dealing with chaos that's going on. And within 24 hours, that person had rang back, a friend of mine, and said, wow, it's just such a completely different day that I now have. The routine, choosing who you surround yourself with, and divvying up your day into strategic pieces, it's critical. Now, by the way, I've had 2 particular days in the last few months I can think where I've had an absolute meltdown, and that strategy has not worked.
I think we've probably all had meltdowns, Chris.
With a lot of booze, I might add. That is, I don't know what it's like in your house, but we are contributing to a large percentage of Australia's uptake in booze sales at the moment. But there's a recognition also of that's okay, including the booze piece, right? It's okay to have a meltdown. Don't beat yourself up for it, because you can pick yourself back up the next day. And again, who you surround yourself with, tell the people that are around you that that's going on. And if you are having another drink or 2 or 5 in the evening, more at the moment, then again, that's acceptable. It's not about criticizing yourself too much. These are crazy times. I hate the word unprecedented, so let's use the word crazy. It is crazy. We will get through this. There's no doubt. I know everyone keeps saying that as well. And we will look back on this era as one momentous mountain that we all climb together.
Yeah. I think, like, I don't normally drink, but yeah, I'm a big fan of Four Pillars Gin, thanks to Matt.
Matt Jones is doing very well.
He is. Actually, we were talking a bit about that before, and we're sort of segue into sort of COVID-19. I'm mindful of the time. And we were talking about sort of what perhaps the future might look like post-COVID-19. So I'll get you to talk about that, and then just talk about how, you know, some examples of how some companies have pivoted to sort of adjust to this new norm, as everybody's calling it.
There's heaps happening, Anne, in this space. There's going to be heaps of insights and content that we're going to be generating and sharing on our stages, virtually or physically, in the next period of time. I think the couple of things that I've noticed, so if you talk about businesses that are pivoted, I mean, one that you and I love dearly is Four Pillars Gin and Matt Jones and what they've done there. They've done a huge pivot into creating hand sanitizer. I mean, what an opportunity. I mean, that's just an example of how many companies are trying to help the situation. We've got Formula One, the F1 teams are also creating breathing ventilators at the moment. But aside to the medical side, I mean, there's been a huge uplift in the at-home economy platform platforms. How virtualization is also going to be a big thing. One of the things that I have seen that we need to be really careful of is not just transposing our old world ideas from physical into digital, because that won't work, and it never has worked. And for decades since tech has been around, where we've seen companies really fall foul is where they try and get a really old crappy process and just digitize it and hope that, because I'm making it digital, that means it'll work. It doesn't. And in the same sense, if you're an events company, or if you're a professional conference organizer, or involved in the events industry in any way, shape or form, trying to transpose a physical experience that we used to have on a stage or an expo and try and just digitize that. And I've seen people doing it, and it's been, there's a few examples being posted on LinkedIn. It's rubbish. It won't work. And what you've got to do, so the question is then, well, what are we going to do if we're going to virtualize a conference? You've got to start from the ground up and build it up again. You've got to look at what type of experience do you have through a screen versus what you had on a physical stage or in an expo center. They couldn't be more different. So redesigning the experience, looking at the experience from scratch, that's going to be a big thing. And that applies, by the way, whether you're in retail as well. I mean, if you look at one of the big impacts we're going to see out of this are some massive retail brands are going to go under. There's no doubt at all. We can't avoid that. But the great thing we're going to see is a huge amount of retail and innovation, new retail businesses pop up out of nowhere that come at a rate of knots, new businesses. And where they'll be different is the fusion of the online and offline experiences that we haven't yet got right. And because we've hit this massive reset button, we're going to see these businesses pop up really, really quickly. So when you look at these big headlines of retail businesses that have gone under, keep an eye then on that space of this vacuum that's going to be filled very, very quickly from new ones that pop up and start up. But the difference is they are not just going to be physical first. These are going to be digital first retail businesses with physical presence as a secondary part.
Yeah, awesome. Fascinating, actually. I think when we come out the other end, we will be in a very different
It's
world.
going to be a different world, no doubt, no doubt.
Without a shadow of a question. I am mindful of time.
But we still will have things like these Sham Wow commercials. I feel like we're on a Sham Wow Glen 20. If you ring the number on the bottom of the screen now, you will get 5 for the price of 3, and we will allow you to defer payments for 6 months, and that's going to become a new normal for us.
That's funny. We could probably sell that on eBay for a lot of money right now.
Do you know what? I'll tell you what, it's got to be almost half a litre in here. I wonder how much that's worth.
We have just we do have a couple of questions, and one of them was just around virtual conferences. I've got them on the iPad.
Okay.
And, whether or not, one of the things that has always been really evident from the meetings industry and from the research and everything that's been done through both Becca and Mia and everything is that the number one thing people want to do is that they want to network and they want to connect. So, and I think probably moving forward from an events perspective, that is just going to actually probably increase tenfold because people have been so isolated.
Locked up.
Correct. And would have attended a number of events and gatherings that they can't get to. So what do you think sort of moving forward in terms of virtual conferences versus the whole face-to-face?
So I've got a couple of views on this one. The first one is, you're right, we've been talking about virtualization of conferences since man landed on the moon, right? And the most common things, the most common thing has always been, why don't people just video conference you in as a speaker? Exactly, holograms is the most cliched one I think we've all heard to death. And the reality is people love this, and we know this, and I'm not teaching anyone to suck eggs. We love the face-to-face, we love the getting together. We're going to need that more than ever after this. So what's going to happen that's different after we come out of this? I think we are now going to really take a long, good, hard look at what an event looks like from a physical perspective. Because if you think about it, there's not much innovation that's happened in the last 10 or 15 years in the event space on how we do events. And I think if we look at now, we've got a whole bunch of event companies, AV companies, design companies that are sat with gear on shelves and waiting to do stuff. There's going to be an opportunity now where we'll see people start to reimagine what a conference event will look like. And again, now also looking at how technology can help bring us together That's the first part. The second part to this is I think we're going to be very much more localized in events, certainly for the next 2 years. What do I mean by that? I think if we look at here in Australia, where we're talking about today, I think Australia is going to focus and double down on Australian events. There's going to be very limited international travelers for a period of time. I think we're going to have more potentially roadshow type events where instead of doing massive, huge events in one place, we'll split them out into more medium-sized events around the country to help a little bit more with social distancing. Companies are going to be revisiting their corporate travel policies, so the events industry is going to have to work around that. And then as time goes on and as countries become more comfortable with the notion of people traveling between countries, then we'll start to see a relaxing of travel rules. But expect very soon, just like we have to have pre-checks done before we travel to America, expect to have immunization information now in your passports as we go through. Event attendees, conferences, organizers will have to be on the front foot around, hey, how do we make sure that we're covering off client requirements around immunization checks beforehand? So start getting your head around that. That's going to be a big topic as we go through into next year for sure.
Yeah, right. Okay. One of the questions that come up is, how do you see 5G affecting us?
This has been a good question. So the relationships I have within both the NBN and the mobile network operators last year, we're all heralding 5G as a great opportunity. I think what we've done is ramp up the need now for 5G. And essentially in layman's terms, 5G allows us to have really high bandwidth, so lots of data at very quick speed, so low latency, high capacity, low latency. What this does now is means that with a 5G enabled device, wherever we are, be it at home or traveling or in an event space, that we can have enormous amounts of data and capacity wherever we need it. And if you look at now the stress that's being put on our networks, we've got kids at home streaming content, we've got online streaming of video at unprecedented levels, we've got people working from home. I think we're really challenging our current infrastructure, so 5G is going to be more important for us than ever. Notice that the Australian telcos, though, have also ramped up their offerings. They've added unlimited data now to anyone on the consumer and small business side, which is just a lifesaver for the majority of us. And it's ironic that this year is the big year for 5G as well. So that'll, I think we'll see that being ramped up. And when you're looking at an event, if you're an events organizer, like we've got here, 3 cameras here, these ones are cabled in, but events now you're going to be having to look to how you can augment streaming of content via video cameras into your events. And that's going to be 5G as an absolute. For stuff like that. If you want real-time, high-definition content streaming from wherever you want, then 5G is going to be the platform we're going to see adopted quite quickly for that. And interestingly, some of the guys and girls that I work with cameras and streaming technology, they've been commenting that Australia has sold out of all streaming equipment now, as people jump onto this notion that we're going to be doing lots of video streaming. And again, 5G modems for that have just gone flying off the shelves.
Yeah, right. So maybe one more question before we finish up today, and this actually relates to schools going online, Chris, and students being isolated at home and working from home. What are your thoughts on that?
I think the unfortunate thing is there's a huge disparity between some schools that have been really geared up for online versus others that haven't. I think I hate talking about the challenge, the negative side of this, and being a dad myself, one of the things that I'm very conscious of is the impact of isolation on my little girl. And however much positivity we put around video streaming platforms where people can connect with each other, there is a distinct difference between that and what we're doing now, the physical connecting with each other. I think we will never truly understand the impact that our children are going to go through in this era, and this will have potentially a huge impact for decades and a generation to come. But I look on the opposite side and go, look at all the amazing things that we're doing now. Parents spending more time doing crafts and engaging with their children in ways they never would have done just a year ago that would have been unfathomable. Go into Officeworks and go and try and buy any paints or paper or a smock like we bought for our little girl. It's impossible. Everywhere's run out because mums and dads are going in and they're being creative in how to do activities at home now. So I think whilst we look at the negative and we immediately worry about the impacts that putting our kids online and sitting them in front of a screen and they haven't got the physicality with their kids anymore as much now for a period of time, there is the flip side to this where we're doing things with each other, we're engaging with our kids, we're creating new experiences, and that's the bit I focus on. I look at what we're doing in our house. The amount of time I'm spending at home now is unprecedented. And that's something that we'll get that we never had. So that for me is where a good thing. And let's understand, this isn't going to last forever. This is a period in time. It is momentous. There is no doubt at all. But the impact of what we're doing now, we can make this a really, really good thing.
Yeah, awesome. Now, finish off on something that is dear to both you and me. So, some people know and some people don't know that I'm a mad gamer.
Oh, that's right.
And we were talking about this the other day because you were getting your PlayStation up and running. So,
it's so true.
What are you currently playing?
I can't believe you're telling people this.
I know, right? What are you playing?
So I have a PlayStation, which I'm even embarrassed to admit I've got. I haven't had that PlayStation. I had to dust off from the cupboard. It's a PlayStation 4, which I still think is the current one. And I went and bought Doom. Now, I'm 39. I remember playing Doom and Duke Nukem. I don't know how many of our generation are online, but Doom and Duke Nukem were my games, network games that I used to play at school. So I went and bought Doom, and I've also got Grand Theft Auto as well. So, but Doom is like, I don't know, did you ever play Doom back on the computer in the day?
Yeah. Long time ago.
Wild. It is wild. Definitely not something you should play with your little child around. I quickly learned that one.
No.
But yeah, so I genuinely don't. I heard this rumor from somebody over in Perth after the exhibition the other week. I hear you're a gamer.
I am. I love gaming. So
I would never have believed this.
Nobody does actually, but yeah. So I'm a huge Lara Croft fan.
What?
Yeah, and Call of Duty. So my daughter lives in London, so it's a great way for her and I to connect. We play Call of Duty online. And
so what kind of gear do you have?
Yeah, you know, that might be going too far. But I'm not a full-blown gamer, but yeah, I love it. It's a really good escape for me. I just get out of the sort of day-to-day norm. So yeah.
Anyway, Anne Jamison, a gamer, a
nerd
gamer.
So I look forward to playing you online. Anyway, so just a shout out to everybody who joined us today. Thank you so much for taking time out and just listening to our fireside chat and getting to know Chris a little bit on a more personal basis than potentially you would have before. Look forward to reconnecting with everybody again on Thursday. So Thursday, 10 o'clock, we have Lisa Messenger joining us. So Lisa's really going to focus on sort of working from home and how not to sort of feel really isolated when you're doing so. So many thanks for joining us today, Chris. Thanks so much to Dan Event Hire and Scene Change again. And look forward to reconnecting with you all again later this week. Bye for now.